There's an inside joke that one of my students and I have had for a while now, because we often discuss the state of the world, all the craziness that is happening, and so on. And the joke goes like, okay, did you have that on your bingo card for this year? Because I didn't. And in 2023, it was crazy stuff like a Chinese spy balloon floating over American airspace for a long time until it finally gets shot down. The Canadian government doing a standing ovation for a, a former Nazi soldier. So if you put that stuff in a movie, nobody would say like everybody would say like, come on. I mean, that's just outrageous. But it happens in real life. And that kind of gave me the idea a while ago on my Facebook page, like a few days ago, to have my bingo card for 2024. And I want to talk a little bit about that and also what's in store for the rest of the year with the podcast and so on. So the idea of the bingo card is, and if you don't know what bingo is, look it up. It's not that spectacularly new, but you put on some predictions for this year, and I would very much advise everybody to do the same thing. Just write an email to yourself, store it somewhere in your archive that you can see it again. Then 1st of January 2025 or December 31st 2024, put a reminder in your calendar to read it again and see what you got right and see what you got wrong. The idea is to have fun with it. Why? Well, we live in interesting times, as the saying goes, and there's so much craziness that is going on that one of the few ways to not completely lose your mind is to laugh at it all, is to find the humor in it and get some perspective. And in that regard, playing this bingo game is kind of fun, but also a little bit sarcastic, obviously, because we will talk about serious things that leave you hopefully better able to cope with all the stress and sometimes for some people anxiety that comes along with the uncertainty, with rapidly changing times, with very important geopolitical events that have been happening for the past few years and that seem to be increasing in frequency. So that's kind of the goal. I wrote my bingo card publicly again on my Facebook page. You can look it up there, but I'll go over it a little bit and see how you guys like it. And then I would very much suggest again, write your own and let me know at the end of 2024 what you got right and what you got wrong. And it'll be fun. It'll be fun to do that. So what do I have on the card? First one, alien invasion. We're ready for it. If you've been following the news a little bit about UFOs and so on, and now they call it differently. What is it, UAPs or I forget because it's like a silly acronym change that there's no. I don't really see the point, but that's a little bit of a tangent. I'm not going to go into. There's been so many hearings in the U.S. About reports and pilots that have seen these unidentified objects flying, doing crazy things. A TikTok video that's been out for a few years, and every now and then, for the past few years, there's like new information that comes out. But what is relatively new is these hearings that they talk about in, if I'm not mistaken, it's congressional hearings, where supposedly serious politicians are holding hearings about unidentified flying objects. And there seems to come some confirmation every now and then out of the Pentagon and the US military and so on about certain things. The conspiracy theorists, if that's or the people who really want this to be true, doesn't matter where you find yourself on that scale, they're preparing us. This is predictive programming. They're preparing us for the alien invasion. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. I really have no solid opinion on it. The I understand the Fermi paradox. I understand, the dark forest theory and so on. So I'm not going to go into all the technical reasons behind it. But for me, it's mostly like there's absolutely no way for me to confirm any of this. to know that what is true, what isn't true. I doubt I ever will in my lifetime. So there's no point really for me in discussing this. Um, the science fiction fan in me wants it to be true, and wants to be true in a sense that would find that very interesting. At the same time, it would be incredibly scary, frightening, and would have huge effects, geopolitically speaking, as well as locally speaking, if mankind suddenly found out that it's not alone in the universe and they're actually here and they have been here for a very long time. So it'd be interesting to see how that played out, but I would expect that it would have massive negative consequences, probably positive ones along the way, unless the aliens do actually take over. And if you want to see a fun movie about that, look up Mars Attacks. It's an older movie, but it's quite fun. That talks about an alien invasion. The point is that it's been popping up so regularly this past year even, that there's these hearings and all this information coming out, that either the believers who say that they're preparing us for it, they are starting to get a point, and the other side of the equation of conspiracy theorists and so on, and activists and what have you. I mean, you could lump a bunch of people in that category. They're talking about, well, no, it's trying to obfuscate and control the news cycle, because every single time there's something new about Hunter Biden, that's when they, the very same day, or the next day, there's this alien thing that is in the news, taking over the news cycle and the headlines to basically, wipe under the rug whatever's going on with Hunter Biden again that is newsworthy. I'm like, okay, I guess. I mean, I'm not really that convinced that's the case, but I'm not saying it's impossible. Manipulation of mass media is not new. A lot of people nowadays think that in the age of the internet, that is basically when it started. It is not by far, by far. It's centuries old, if not millennia old, that news and information has been manipulated. Um, so so I wouldn't be surprised that there's an element of that as well. But most of all, where it boils down to me, what it boils down to for me is that, you know, if tomorrow the headlines of all the newspapers are that the aliens are here and they've been here for over a century or longer, whatever, like, that wouldn't surprise me. I would not I would not fall off my chair immediately. So again, remember, the point of the bingo card is to have fun, right? Is to not take everything too seriously and to have fun while we live through these tumultuous times. So that's the first entry. Second one is another pandemic. Pandemics don't necessarily begin and end, and then we're done for the rest of rest of time with that specific one. No, they sometimes come back after a few years. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's a resurgence of whatever variation of COVID-19 that might suddenly become dominant and resistance to the vaccination and all this other stuff. Wouldn't surprise me. Now, will it happen? I have no idea. But I think it's a good one to have on your bingo card, in the sense that it wouldn't be surprising after all that we've had with the pandemic in the past few years, from 2020 to 2024 now, we've seen massive change in society. And many governments did a bunch of things that in normal times, all the citizens would say they'll never do that, but they did. So it wouldn't surprise me that we have a new one, because actually one of the a variation of the virus evolves and creates problems, but also that it's in the interest of some governments to actually have this stick to beat everybody down with, and to have them obey, as the saying goes. Not looking forward to that at all. Um, I've talked about it previously, but the pandemic was the perhaps the two worst financial years of my adult professional life, because I wasn't allowed to work by my government. So not looking forward to it, but it would not be inconceivable that there's not a wave that hits that suddenly we're supposed to take seriously. Not saying that you don't have, that the first wave wasn't serious. What I am saying is that everything that's happened, and I will speak for my own country. There's a lot here that the government got really wrong, that they seriously messed up, and it's not a matter of conspiracy theories. It's an objective truth that that only now, years later, very slowly the admissions are starting to come in, and there's still, like, the Minister of Health is refusing to release his emails from that era, even though he's obligated to do so. He's refusing to divulge everything that's in there because of a lot of suspicions on malfeasance, lobbying that was done and ended up with pretty bad results for the population, and a bunch of other stuff. So this is what's going on here, what happened here, and the way that the public views the government right now. It's going to be very tricky if there's a next wave that is actually serious, which is something I've talked about with many people over the past few years, especially this last year. Um, this is true across the board. We live in a society in which you're supposed to have a short memory. That's kind of what everything has devolved into. Meaning, a lot of people talk now about what happened in 2020, but they forget what it was like back then, or they leave out parts back then. Meaning, what did we know when it started? Very little, very little information was there, and the information was not necessarily reliable. I was fortunate in the sense that one of my students who regularly worked in China, I joked with him about that. I think it was in late January or February when the first, news reports started to trickle in that something was going on in China. And I said, hey, jokingly, I said, you got that flu or you got that cold now from there? And he says, oh, hold on, it's there. It's very serious there. I mean, factories are shutting down and everything. It's very serious. So I was like, okay, he's a serious person as well. So I looked into it and saw that China was like building a hospital in just a week's time, just massive infrastructure work that you normally don't do as a government. So I kept looking deeper into it, and discovered that I think this is actually real, and this is going to be global scale problem, and started preparing for it. Talked about it in the past, not going to repeat it. But the point is that these kind of things happen. Pandemics happen. So it wouldn't surprise me if we have another one. So moving on to the next point, which is related to that. Next one on my bingo card is the US elections end with massive lawsuits and no accepted winner. We have elections too in Belgium next year. So we'll see. I'll talk about that a little bit, but everything that I've seen now is that US elections, no matter who wins, don't care who it is, whether it's Biden, whether it's Trump, whether it's somebody else, it doesn't matter. Whatever happens, the opposing side will not accept that the winner is there. Now, again, we get back to the point of people not being used to having a memory that is longer than 5 seconds. Go back to Al Gore contesting the election results way back, what is it, well, 20 years ago, longer, I forget. Um, and we were talking about dangling chads on, the election papers that were filled out, the ballots. That was what we were talking about back then. And it took a while until he conceded that he lost the elections. This is years ago, this is decades ago, right? So it's not like this is new, but it's increasing in intensity, the lawfare. So actually fighting through political fights, through legal action, has been going on for a while. And And I always say, I tell people, like, whenever I say something, don't view it through the lens of Democrat, Republican, view it through the lens of, I think all politicians are, well, almost all are despicable. I'm not a fan of anybody. And it's like a necessary evil that we have in society. There's no way around it. They're all going to be there. But for the vast majority, they're all just as bad. Just varying degrees of less bad is what I would say. The point is that there's no way, given everything that's happened in the past year since the Trump presidency and then the Biden presidency, that there's no way anybody's going to accept the victory of one candidate over another, which means that immediately there will be massive lawsuits fighting it, and these take time. They don't get adjudicated overnight, which means that you will have a very long period of instability, which means that if so the elections are in November, typically, around January, that's when the new president goes into the White House and assumes his office, that there's a high likelihood that if things haven't been completely legally settled by then, and that's very likely not to have happened, then riots, massive protests, and a further fracturing of the United States to the point where, when I say civil war, people always get like, yo, you're exaggerating. Again, look up the generations of warfare. What a lot of people think when they hear the word civil war is like the first civil war in the United States. That is not what we're talking about at all. Not the same thing. We're talking fourth and fifth generational warfare, which, again, if that's new to you, look it up and you'll find out more about it. The point is that we're already in this situation in the US and in many places in the West where there is a fracturing of society already. There's no consensus on the truth anymore. You've got, broadly speaking, two sides, but actually there's many more. If you don't have a consensus on reality, then the only thing that can come out of that is conflict. And the more this conflict escalates, the more you get to the point where people actually start using violence, insofar as they haven't already. So I predict that that's going to happen with the US elections. And that's going to have massive ramifications for the US and on the geopolitical scale as well. Now, speaking of Belgium, my own country, again, we have elections. It's looking like the populists will take power, both from the far right and the far left. Why? Well, because the government we have now is very unpopular. They did a lot of unpopular things during the pandemic. Right now, they are pretty much being characterized by indecision, ineffectiveness, and lots of people are unhappy with it. You could say that's true in many countries and in many eras, but I think in this particular case, given everything that's come together, we'll have a big upheaval as well in the coming elections. And it immediately brings me to my next prediction, and that is that after the May elections, we will not have a government before 2025. For those who don't remember, Belgium has the world records in forming a government. It took us longer than it took Iraq back after the Gulf War. It took us longer than them to form a government. So we're number one. We win. We're the best in the world at that. And my prediction is that there's a good chance that we will break that record. The minimum that I'm going to have is elections in May, not before 2025. No government until then, for a variety of reasons. There's a huge budget deficit. There's a bunch of other stuff that's going on that is just impossible to fix. And we have all the ruling parties right now are going to have to start talking to each other again, and they're pretty much almost rolling, fighting through the streets. There's actually talks of a physical confrontation between one member of government with another a while ago. So I don't see how they can get to agreement with anything without massive protests. Not necessarily in the streets, but just the civilian population really being not in agreement that this is what the result of the elections is. So we'll see. We'll see. But I kind of doubt it that it's going to end well or early. So what else? Well, something more fun. I'm betting that new music of Prince and Michael Jackson is going to be released. We know that Prince had a lot of music that he hadn't released just yet before he passed away, and there's some talk that the same is true about Michael Jackson. Now, ever since all the documentaries that came out about Michael Jackson, it has kind of been a little bit on the down low and not that popular anymore. But I'm betting that people who, especially as a big part of society, is looking fondly towards the past, as in contrast to all the things that are going on right now. That they want to have some 80s and 90s music, and that these two artists are the ones that a lot of people would look forward to having new material from. I know there's a lot of issues with Prince and the people, the family and those who inherited the rights of his music catalog and so on. But there's a lot of legal stuff going on there. But I wouldn't be surprised if new music comes out, and for sure, that's going to sell well if it happens. So that would be an upside, in my opinion. But there's some more downsides. And the next one on my bingo list is that companies and actors are going to come out and say that they weren't really woke after all, and that all that DEI is very much overrated. So I kind of already basically jumped the gun with that one. Why? Because there was already a news report, and that was, if I'm not mistaken, last week they came out that tech companies like Google and Meta made cuts to the DEI programs in 2023 after they made a lot of promises. So the woke stuff is on the out. This is something that I've talked about a while before as well, is that the tide has been shifting for especially this last year. The Bud Light thing was really big, and that was kind of like a watershed moment, I think, in society, that just so many people were fed up with all the woke stuff that they said that we don't care anymore. And the pendulum has started to swing in the other direction, which is a good thing if it would stop in the center, but that's not how the pendulum works. It will swing all the way to the opposite side, and then we get to bad stuff on that side as well. That's the history of mankind. It's always been like that. I don't see why it would be any different now. But this is something that if anybody had, just a fraction of information about human nature and then read a little bit about history, you could have seen this one coming. So I'm guessing that this trend of companies, very quietly getting rid of the departments and the hirers for diversity, equity, and inclusion, that they're going to do more of that, and that a lot of funding will dry up for these kind of organizations and nonprofits that have been pushing the postmodernist agenda for many, many years now. Because somebody needs to pay for all that. And if companies are starting to pull funds, that's when the activists go away. Why? Because they're not getting paid anymore. They're going to have to do something else. Now, postmodernism will not go away. My thought is that it's going to go underground first. It's going to, become a little bit more quiet and trying to insert itself into society, companies, institutions, and so on in a different way, and eventually reemerge in some fashion or another. A good example is there was this big scandal very recently about the Ivy League schools refusing to condemn, hate speech and certain things that were happening on their campuses in a congressional hearing. Result is one. Was it? It was. I think it's Penn State. I forget which one the director had already resigned. And then Harvard. It took several months, but Harvard's president just resigned like yesterday or the day before. It cost Harvard a lot in both funding. I think it was over $1 billion that funding that just basically evaporated. People said that we're not funding this. Reputational damage tremendously. Many companies, big law firms, and so on said that we are not hiring anybody from Harvard anymore if this is what you guys stand for. Because, and we can talk about the politics of this, but The point is that if, and I saw the congressional hearing, so if you said what that um, president of Harvard said, Claudine Gay, what she said in Congress, if you say the same thing about any other ethnic group or whatever in a company, in a big law firm and so on, you get fired. If that's what you publicly state, your employer is going to say that, nope, you're gone. So that's kind of a big, again, watershed moment. And it gets more complex, but the thing that it happened is, I mean, she resigned. She just released a news piece in the New York Times where basically she's the victim, and you know, people are coming after her, and it's racist and this and that. I'm like, you know, I don't think so. There's point after point after point that you can give to address this. That the polling that was done about free speech on campus, Harvard scored the lowest of all universities that were polled. Um, Double standard of, you know, misgendering somebody could get you fired, but not condemning genocide needed context. I mean, that's a huge double standard, and that was a thing basically. And then there's a plagiarism, which now is being redefined by a lot of people trying to protect her, saying that, well, you know, she just didn't attribute it. Yeah, that's the definition that Harvard uses for students to, you know, punish them for plagiarism. So there's so much going on here that it was untenable, her position, and now she's gone. She's not fired from the university though. She's retaining her $900,000 a year salary, and she will be, you know, going back to faculty and teaching. So that's what I mean with that. You know, the postmodernism is not just going to go away without a fight. It is going to go more underground, and a lot of people who defended all that kind of stuff will be very quiet now. You'll see people removing their pronouns from their bios. You'll see people saying, well, you know, I wasn't really into that anyway. The issue with that is that the internet is forever, and people will start bringing the receipts. Really, you weren't into it. Here's everything you said about XYZ for all these years that is extremely woke. And now you were the guys always screaming for accountability. Here it is, but this time it's against you. I've been saying for years that postmodernism wrecks societies, and here we are. Perhaps what the most prestigious university in the United States, Harvard, has lost a tremendous amount of respectability. And one of the main reasons why students attend there, it's to have the network that once you graduate, you can immediately get to the highest positions. You meet so many other people who will end up in high positions, and you create a network of connections that then help you throughout your career, make you valuable for a company that hires you. That network has now become toxic in many places. So why would you send your kid to Harvard? Again, this is all postmodernism. Could go deeper into it. I won't. But I think the same thing is going to happen to a lot of companies. They're very quietly getting rid of the DEI stuff and the postmodernist stuff. They're not saying it all that loudly, but they're just, you know, going the other direction. Case in point, Bud Light, after, you know, all the drama that happened in the boycott, what did they do? Well, now they're sponsoring the UFC. And Dana White says, anybody who complains, you know, get lost. I don't care. We're taking them on as a sponsor. But the funny part is that, you know, Sean Strickland, who's one of the champions at the UFC, said that, okay, that's great because now Bud Light is sponsoring everything that I say. And then he says some outrageous stuff that, you know, the DEI people would not be very happy about. So it's kind of catch-22 that Bud Light finds itself in. A lot of companies will, in my opinion, end up in the same with the same issue. So we'll see about that. Let's move on to the next one. The EU economy tanks and populist state power. Kind of touched on that already. We've got there's a graph. It's on my Twitter page. Go to Wim Demeere Twitter. You'll find me there, and I post more political and economical and geopolitical stuff there. And there's a graph from the past few years where you see the German industry as a whole, just how it goes up and down. And then there's energy intensive industry in Germany, and that just cratered the last few years, like completely cratered. That has massive consequences. Why? Germany has been for a long time the engine of the European economy. It is deindustrializing at an increasing rate. There's many CEOs of multinationals and small companies that have told the German government, both publicly with open letters and from what I've heard, also privately, saying like, guys, this will not, you won't be able to stop this. You have to act now, change the energy policy. We need cheaper energy because we can't work here anymore. I think it was Michelin, the tire company, that already said that we're closing down our factory here. We're moving out. Good news for the United States, because the United States is opening its arms to many other companies that are leaving Europe, which is, I'm sure, a total coincidence. But moving on, um, the whole European economy is going to feel what's happening in Germany now. And for some reason, German politicians, they keep insisting that the Grüne Wende, so the green turn, kind of is how you can translate it, it's going green, shutting down all nuclear plants, that somehow that they need to keep doing that. We'll see what happens, but I don't see, I mean, you cannot just flip a switch and put a few more nuclear plants online after you shut them down. It's not how it works. So building new ones, it's not how it works. And insisting on having more renewables and so on, it's not working either. So they're kind of stuck with their back against the wall, and there are no more good solutions, which means that for the rest of the European economy, that's going to massively hit us as well. In my country, this is also happening. The harbor of Antwerp is huge. Lots of multinationals are there. There's a bunch of them that are also technically unemployed right now. That it's just that they're not working anymore, and that's increasing. And same thing happens. What do big companies do? They look at the Excel spreadsheet. How much does this cost? How much does this benefit us? And once one of the columns goes negative too much, then they're like, okay, adios, we're out of here. If that happens, the Belgian economy is going to tank as well. And it's not like we're in a good position to begin with. So what all that means? Well, populists take power. What you have in Argentina with Milei, I'm not going to go into him all that much, but he's a populist, and if you like him or don't like him, doesn't matter. He took power, and he's doing radical change. Why? Because he promised radical change. We're going to have the same thing here. Populists are going to say, like, all the guys that you've been voting for decades, they messed it up. I'm going to fix it for you. This, again, historically speaking, we're at that stage right now of society. Many precedents if you want to look up history for that. So that's going to be interesting times as well. And we'll see. We'll see. So next one was car manufacturers back away from electric and focus on the combustion engine again. Right now in Europe, there's a lot of countries governments that are talking about putting tariffs on Chinese electric cars. Why? Well, the whole production cycle of Chinese electric cars, not 100%, but most of it is done in-house, in country itself. So they start from raw materials to end product, and most of that, if not all of it, is found within China itself, which means you have cost savings on a massive scale, which means that the European car manufacturers, who've already had a rough time keeping up with Tesla, which is the biggest one, they're going to have an even rougher time keeping up with the Chinese brands who will sell cars in Europe, electric cars, very cheaply compared to the European brands. Talking Volkswagen, Audi, Mercedes, and so on, going to have a really difficult time. Tesla already lowered its prices on some of its models to the point where they're actually, I wouldn't say necessarily be affordable, but becoming a lot more interesting than those other brands. Now, the other thing you have to know about that is that, again, my country, as of next year, I mean, as of today, sorry, it's the 4th when I record this, as of January 1st, the the fiscal stimulus has changed radically. So increasingly, you will not be able to, in your bookkeeping, put a combustion engine car or a hybrid car in as deductible. It's going to be like 25% less each year very rapidly. If I remember correctly, it's been a while since I read about it. For me, that's important. I am self-employed. My car is the biggest deductible post that I have in my accounting. As of I still have to write it off for a year and a half almost. So I'm already looking into buying a new one. And the end result is that I have no other choice but to buy electric, because that's going to be 100% deductible again. So the government is, on the one hand, giving us less electricity and it's going to be more expensive. On the other hand, it's saying like, can have combustion engine car and have it fiscally interesting. So got no choice. It's going to have to be an electric one. But why on earth would I then buy a European brand that is much more expensive and has less options than a Chinese brand can offer me right now? I'm not saying I am going to buy Chinese. What I'm saying is that a lot of people will say like, I don't care if it's Chinese, I'll buy that. Why? Because that's the one I can afford. And the government is making it impossible to buy anything else at that price range. So eventually, I think car manufacturers and governments will have no other choice but to say like, all this electric stuff, the combustion engine, maybe we'll give that a life extension for a little bit longer. If I'm not mistaken, in the UK, they're already changed legislation a little bit to push forward the phasing out of combustion engines. But you gotta fact check me on that one, because it's also been a while since I read about that. But all this together with what I said about the European economy tanking and so on, and elections and populists and so on that will be elected, when you are in a situation where there's so much chaos, that on top of it is going to be interesting. So 2 more, and then I'm pretty much done. Going to end up in a positive note. Well, relatively positive. My bingo card for this year says Elden Ring DLC is not going to be released this year. I used to be a huge video game player, not so much the last few years. There's a few exceptions. Dark Souls 3 that I started playing many years ago. Well, not that many years ago, a while ago, and enjoyed tremendously for a variety of reasons. And then Elden Ring came out, which is in a way a follow-up, but not really. Which is Game of the Years. It's a massive success, loads of fun. But there's the DLC, which is like an expansion set, downloadable content that was supposed to come out, and lots of predictions about when, but I don't think it's going to come out this year. So that's going to be a huge disappointment, and a lot of people will be disappointed if that's the case. But I think that's going to be a big one. And then the final point is the first feature film fully made with AI is released, and it is better than most Hollywood movies. I've been tracking robotics and AI for many years now. My patrons will know that I started writing about this in the newsletter years ago. And generative AI, whether it's images, but especially video, has jumped in quality with leaps and bounds in the space of 1 year. And it's only getting better, and the progress from what I see is exponential. You can make photorealistic images on your phone right now using AI. Don't need a fancy computer anymore. Most of it is free, some of it is not, but as always with this kind of technology, at first it's expensive, more people adapt it, and then it gets cheaper, and eventually somebody offers it for free or at a low price, and then it gets massively adopted. The same thing is going to happen with AI video, which right now is already extremely impressive. I remember seeing a year ago video about it, and it was really like a very low resolution, crappy video that looked just really bad, and that was AI video. But you could do in real time, type stuff in, and the video would change to show you that. And right now, what we have now with Midjourney and Runway and so on is extremely impressive, which means that you can expect, short films, videos, and so on, um, and feature films. I think that's going to happen this year, and because it doesn't require the same budget that a Hollywood blockbuster requires, um, with a limited amount of money, a fraction of that budget, you can now, thanks to AI, make movies that look just as good. Will it be fully the same thing? Not yet, because there's going to be a learning curve. It's not because you can use the technology to create lifelike images that move that you have the experience making movies, telling a good story, creating interesting characters and so on. That is a completely different skill set. My thoughts is that creatives, writers, authors, script writers, they're in for amazing times. If you can write a good story, you're going to have access to technology that brings it to life like you've never had before. So that would be the positive, because I'm always in for a good movie or a good TV show. Don't care who it is, what it's about, and so on. It just needs to be good. And what Hollywood's been putting out in many regards has not been all that great. There's a graph you can look up for the last, I think, 30, 40 years, where you see the number of original productions and then the number of remakes and series, like, Avengers 1, 2, 3, and so on, and sequels. And you'll see that there's less and less original productions coming out of Hollywood for years now. And this is technology that can change all that, that you're going to have a lot of original content coming out from people who normally wouldn't have access to it. So we'll see. The thing that comes with that is, as I've been saying for many years now, is knowing what is real is going to be very difficult. Because we've had this here in my country where, as election season kicks off, one of the parties, one of the oldest parties in the country, used AI to make a video, an election video, using one of their politicians, former prime minister, who has been dead for a long time, and they brought him back to life. It's like a lot of people kind of fell first, like, what the hell is this? Until they figured out that, okay, no, he's been dead for a while, can be him. And, oh, it's AI. So the fight for what is actually real is going to be very, very interesting. I'm going to end on two quick notes. Just today, I posted that what I didn't have on my bingo card is that a tornado would pass very closely to my house and rip apart, dozens of houses. I was training in the attic when it passed, didn't hear a thing, didn't notice anything. If the tornado would have hit my house, I haven't been in a tornado ever, so I can't comment much on the details. But I'm guessing that you would have some time to get out of, to go downstairs. If not, I would have been gone, because I've seen the houses here in around the corner, the just roof totally ripped off. You don't want to be in one of those attics when that happens. Talk to my wife talked to a friend here who lives in one of those houses that was almost hit, and she said, like, kind of like you get, it's like getting sucked into a vacuum. Very, very weird. So I managed to escape that one. And another one I just added to my Facebook page is that where you see that in Las Vegas a judge is attacked during sentencing. She sentences a guy, he jumps, over the bench, grabs her, starts punching her in the face. People, try to stop him. It's pandemonium, and it's the 4th of January, and this kind of stuff is already happening. So my overall point is this: it's going to be a crazy year. It's going to be a crazy year with European elections, with US elections. We've got war in Ukraine. We've got war in the Middle East. Got so much going on. I don't see how it's going to quiet down. And I want you to remember 2019 as to wrap it up with how I started. What my students said is that if you look at 2019, December 31st, and you made your predictions for the next year, or your plans, or how you think, things were going to go, you were massively wrong, because a few months later the pandemic hit. Since then, things have not quieted down. Things have already gotten crazier and crazier. And I think because it's an election year, 2024 is just going to be nuts. It's going to be nuts. So, what do? You do the best you can. You take care of yourself, your loved ones, your health, your job. Do what you need to do. Stay safe and try to enjoy life anyway, because that's the only option. So that's why I'm going to keep on laughing, having fun, having a good time to avoid ending up in this cycle of depression over just how bad everything can get. It's always been like that. Life on this planet has always been crazy, but sometimes a little bit more so than others. The good news is that I've got already some stuff that's going to come out. Next episode is going to be Jan Kwaihagen's Belgian MMA fighter who is doing quite well. I talked to him a while ago. There were some technical issues with the sound again that I had to fix, which is it's very difficult and takes a long time. I'm very lucky that my video editing suite now has AI that can fix sound, but I have to fiddle with the settings, and then it takes an hour to process the whole thing. So that's hopefully we'll be able to release that soon. Xavier Knox, South African knife maker, very much appreciate his work. His knives are mainly self-defense focused, so it's going to be an interesting interview as well, and a lot more that I'm working on trying to get guests, but it's too soon to tell. So we'll see. All right, that's it. That's it for the bingo edition. Long talk, went all over the place. Hope you guys enjoy that. I'll leave it with this. There will always be martial arts and self-defense guests and information on my podcast because it's one of the main focuses of my life. However, I'm interested in so much more. So you've noticed that over the past year that I've interviewed different guests, authors, and people from all walks of life with different levels of experience and expertise in things that are not necessarily directly related to that. Why? Because that's what interests me, and I'm the guy doing all the work with the podcast, and so it needs to interest me to begin with. I hope you can support me in that. I hope you can just see that okay, what I'm doing more and more is there's going to be guests that you're like, I'm not interested in that one, skip that episode. But there will always be guests that and topics that I will talk about that have to do with self-defense and martial arts. So that's not going to go away, but there's going to be more than that. Um, you guys, the audience, you're what makes this possible. In particular, my patrons that I have to thank for. We're starting next month. It's going to be the 6th year that I'm on Patreon. Literally hundreds and hundreds of videos, bonus podcast episodes, and so on that are there. You guys are paying for the hosting of everything and the equipment that I have to get. So shout out to my patrons. If you want to become a patron, patreon.com/Wim Demeere. Again, all the links are in the show notes. Go there, join us. Starts at $3 a month. That's like about the price you pay for for Starbucks, which is not the coffee I would recommend. But lots of stuff there already. You get access immediately to the whole library, the archive of content as soon as you join up. There's a lot more there, and the absolute best part, in my opinion, is if you enjoy the podcast, especially the guests. If you are a patron at Orange Belt level, I think then you can ask questions to the guests. So I will compile a list of questions for each guest, and then in the bonus segment, which you only can see on Patreon, that's where they will answer your questions. So I think that's a pretty good deal. Why do I say this? Because I've been told by so many people that I'm not commercial enough, that I don't advertise enough. Like, well, there you go. I just did. Okay, folks, wishing you all the best for 2024, and I will talk to you next time.